Chapter number 9, Heredity and Evolution. We have studied that reproductive process produce new individuals that are similar but subtly different. We have studied how some amount of changes is produced even during a sexual mode of reproduction, and the number of successful changes are maximized by the sexual reproduction. If you see a field of sugarcane, we find very little changes among the individual plants, but in various animals and including human beings which reproduce sexually, quite distinct variations are visible among separate individuals. In this chapter, we shall be learning the mechanism by which variations are generated and inherited the long term inherited the long term consequence of the accumulation of changes are also an interesting point to be thought, and we shall be learning this under evolution accumulation of variation during reproduction. Inheritance from the previous generation gives both a common basic body organizations as well as subtable changes in it for the next generation. Now think about what would occur when this new generation reproduces is in it turns. The second generation will have variations that they inherit from the first generation as well as newly generated variations. The figure would show the situation if a single individual reproduces as occurs in a sexual reproduction. If one bacterium divides and then the newly produced two bacteria divide again, the four individual bacteria produced would be very similar. There would be only very minor changes between them generated due to a small inheritance in DNA copying. However, if a reproduction in a sexual even greater diversity will be created as we will note when we discuss the rules of inheritance. Do all these changes in a species have equal chances of surviving in the surrounding in which they find themselves, obviously not depending on the nature of differences. Various individuals would have various advantages. Bacteria that can face heat will survive better in a heat wave. As we have studied earlier, selection of changes by environmental factors makes the basis for involuntary process, as we will study in later sections. Heredity, the most obvious result of the reproductive process, still remains the generation of individuals of a similar design. The rules of heredity ensure the process by which characteristics and traits are reliably inherited. Let us study these rules. Inherited traits. What exactly do we mean by differences and similarities? As we know that a child bears all the basic features of a human being. However, it does not exactly look like its parents and human populations, so a great deal of variations or differences. Rules for the inheritance for traits, Mendel's contributions. The rules for inheritance of these traits in humans are related to the fact that both the mother and the father give practically equal amounts of genetic material to the child. This shows that each trait can be influenced by both maternal and paternal DNA. Thus, for each trait, there will be two different variations in each child. What will then the trait appeared in the child be? Mendel C. Box gave the main rules of this inheritance, and it is interesting to see some of its experiments from more than a century ago. Mendel used various contrasting visual characters of garden peas, wrinkled round seeds, short tall plants, violet white flowers, and so on. He took pea plants with separate characteristics. Say a tall plant and a short plant generated progeny by crossing them and calculated the percentage of a short or a tall progeny. In the first place, there were no median characteristics in the first generation. On F1 progeny, no medium height plants. All plants produced were tall. This indicated that only one of the parietal traits was observed, not some mixture of the two. So the next question was were the tall plants in the F5 generation exactly similar to the tall plants of the parent generation. Mendelian experiments test this by taking both the parental tall plants and these F1 tall plants to reproduce by self pollination. Of course, the progeny of parental tall plants are all tall. However, the F2 or second generation progeny of the F1 tall plants are not all tall. Instead, 1/4 of them are short. This shows that both the shortness and tallness traits were inherited in the F1 plants, but only the tallness trait was expressed. This led Mendel to propose that two copies of factor now called genus controlling traits are present in a sexually reproduction organisms. So these two may be different or may be identical depending on the percentage on the parentage pattern of inheritance can be worked out with these assumptions as represented in figure. In this expression, both TT and TT are tall plants, while only TT is a short plant trait. In other words, a single copy of a T is enough to produce the plant tall, while both copies need to be T for the plant to be short. Traits like T are known as dominant traits, while those that behaves like T are known as recessive traits. Work out which trait would be considered a dominant and which one recessive in the next figure. What happens when pea plants showing two separate characteristics rather than just one are reproduces with each other? What do the progeny of a short plant with wrinkled seeds and a tall plant with round seeds look like? They are all tall and contain round seeds. Round seeds and tallness are thus dominant traits. But what will occur when this F1 pregnancy are used to produce F2 pregnancy by self pollination? A Mendelian experiment will give that some F2 pregnancy are tall plants having round seeds and some were short plants having wrinkled seeds. However, there would also be some F2 pregnancy that gives new mixtures. Some of them would be tall but with wrinkled seeds, while others would be short. Others would be short but contain round seeds. You can see how new combinations of traits are formed in F2 of spring when factors controlling seed shape and seed color recombine to make zygote to form F2 of spring. See figure. Thus, the short tall trait and the wrinkled seed round seed trait, the trait are independently inherited. How do these traits get expressed? How does the process of heredity work? Cellular DNA is the information source for synthetic proteins in the cell. A section of a DNA that gives information for one protein is known as the gene. For that protein, how do proteins control the characteristics? About that we are talking here. Let us take tallness as a characteristics. We know that plants have hormones. that can stimulate growth. Plant height can thus based upon the amount of a particular plant hormone. The amount of the plant hormone formed will depend on the efficiency of the process for synthesizing it. Consider now protein that is necessary for this process. If this protein works efficiently, a lot of hormone will be formed and the plant will be tall. If the gene for that protein has an alteration that synthesizes the protein less efficient, the amount of hormone will be less in amount and the plant will be short. Thus genes control traits of characteristics. If the interpretations of Madeline experiments we have been studying are correct, then both parents must be contributing equally to the DNA of the progeny in sexual reproduction. If both parents can help in the determination of the trait in the progeny, both parents must be participating a copy of the same gene. This shows that each pea plant must contain two sets of genes, one inherited from each parent. For this mechanism to work, each germ cell must contain only one gene set. How do how do germ cells form a single set of genes from the normal to copies that all other cells in the body contain. If progeny plants inherited a single whole gene set from each parent, then the experiment in figure cannot be useful. This is because the two characteristics Y and R would then be linked to each other and cannot be inherited independently. This is explained by the fact that each gene set is not present as a single long thread of DNA, but present as a separate independent pieces, each known as a chromosome. Thus, each cell will contain two copies of each chromosomes, one each from the female and male parents. Every germ cell will take one chromosome from each pair, and this may be of either paternal or maternal origin. When two germ cells join, they will restore the normal number of chromosomes in the progeny, making sure the stability of the DNA of the species. Such as a mechanism of inheritance shows the results of the Mendel experiments, and is used by all organizations reproducing sexually. But as sexually reproduction organizations also follow the same rules of inheritance, can we find out how their inheritance might work? Sex determination. We have studied the idea that the two sexes participating in sexual reproduction must be somewhat separate from each other for a number of reasons. How is the sex of a neuron of spring determined? Different species use very separate stages for this. Some really completely and on environmental cues. Thus, in some animals, the temperature at which fertilized eggs are placed determines whether the animals developing in the eggs will be female or female or male. In other animals such as snails, individuals can change their sex, showing that sex is not genetically determined. However, in humans, the sex of the individual is largely determined genetically. In other words, the genes inherited from our parents. In other words, the genes inherited from our parents determine whether we will be girls or boys. But so far, we have assumed that identical gene sets are inherited from both parents. If that is the case, how can genetic inheritance decide sex? The explanation lies in the fact that all human chromosomes are not paired. Most human chromosomes have a paternal and a maternal copy, and we have 22 such pairs, but one pair, known as the sex chromosomes, is odd in not being always a perfect pair. Women have a perfect pair of sex chromosomes, both known as X, but men have a mismatched pair in which one is a normal sized X while the other is a shorter one named Y. So men are XY while women are XX. Or now can we work out what the inheritance pattern of Y and X will be? A figure a figure shows half the children will be girls and half will be boys. All children will inherit and X chromosomes from their mother regardless of whether they are girls or boys. Thus, the sex of the children will be decided by what they inherited from their father. A child who inherits a Y chromosomes from his father will be a boy, and one woman inherits and X chromosomes from him will be a girl. Evolution Evolution, we have observed that there is an inbuilt tendency to variation during reproduction, both because of errors in DNA copying and due to sexual reproduction. Let us now see some consequence of this tendency. An illustration. Let us assume a group of 12 red beetles. Suppose they live in some buses with green leaves. Their population will grow by sexual reproduction and hence can generate changes. Let us imagine also that crops each these petals. The more petals are eaten by the crops, the fewer petals are available to reproduce. Now let us imagine about some different situations that can develop in the petal population. In the first situation, a color changing arises in reproduction, so that there is a beetle that has a green color instead of red. This beetle can pass moreover the color on to its progeny, so that all its progeny beetles are green. Crops cannot detect green colored beetles on the green leaves of the plants and therefore cannot eat them. What takes place? The progeny of green beetles is not eaten by the crow, while the progeny of red beetles to be eaten continuously, due to which there are more and more green beetles and red ones in the beetle population. Again, in a second situation, a color variation arises during reproduction, but now it results in a beetle that is of blue color rather than red. This beetle can also inherit the color onto its progeny, so that all its progeny beetles are blue in color. Crows can detect blue colored beetles in the green leaves of the plants as well as they can detect red ones and therefore can eat them. What occurs immensely in the population. As it expands, there are a few blue colored beetles, but most are of red color. But at this point, an element and elephant comes by and stamps on the buses where the beetles live. This kills so many beetles. By chance, the few beetles that remains alive are mostly blue. The beetle population again expands slowly, but now the beetles in the population are mostly blue. It is obvious that in both situations, what started out as rare changes came to be a similar characteristics in the population. In other words, the frequency of an inherited trait varied over generations. Since genes regulate traits, we can say that the frequency of some genes in a population varied over generations. So this is the essence of the idea of evolution. But there are ordering differences too in the two situations. In the first case, the changes became common because it gave a survival advantage. In other words, it was selected naturally. We can see that the natural selection is accepted by the crops. There are more crops, the more red beetles would be eaten, and the more the proportion of green colored beetles in the population would be. Thus natural selection is determining evolution in the beetle population rate. It causes an adaptations in the beetle population for better fit in their environment. In the second situation, the color difference gave no survival advantage. Instead, it was normally a matter of accidental survival of beetles of one color that separated the common characteristics of the resultant population. The elephant would not have led to such major havoc in the beetle population if the population of beetle had been very large. So accidents in a small population can change the frequency of several genes in a population even if they provide no survival advantage. This is the notion of genetic drift, which gives diversity without any adaptations. Now think a third situation in which, as the beetle population begins to expand, the buses begin suffering from a plant disease. The amount of leaf material for the beetles is lowered. The beetles are nurtured purely as as a result, the average weight of adult beetles falls from what is used to be when leaves were plenty after a few years and a few better generations of this scarcity. The plant disease is eliminated. There is plenty of leaf food. What would be except the weight of the beetles to be at this time? Acquired and inherited traits. We studied about the idea that the germ cells of sexually reproducing populations are formed in specialized reproductive tissue. If the weight of the beetle is reduced because of starvation, that will not vary the DNA of the germ cells. Therefore, less weight is not a trait that can be inherited by the progeny of a starving beetle. Hence, even if some generations of beetles are low in weight, resulted by starvation, that is not an example of evolution, since the change is not passed over generations. Change in non-reproductive tissues cannot be inherited onto the DNA of the germ cells. Therefore, the experiences of an individual during its complete lifetime cannot be passed on to its progeny and cannot cause evolution. Think another example of how an individual cannot pass on to its progeny. The experiences of its complete life cycle. If we breed a group of mice, all their progeny will contain tails. As accepted now, if the tails of these mice are removed with the help of surgery in each generation, do these tailless mice have tailless progeny? The answer is no. And it creates sense because removal of the tail cannot vary the genes of the germ cells of the milk. This is the reason why the ideas of genetics and heredity that we have studied earlier are so essential to understanding evolution. Even Cornelius Darwin, who came up in the 19th century with the idea of evolution of species by natural selection, could not work out the mechanism. It is ironic that he could have done so if he had found the advantage of the experiments of his Austrian contemporary Greer Mendel was doing, but then Mendel too did not observe Darwin's work as relevant to his specification. What we have observed so far is micro-evolution that shows that the changes are small, even though they are beneficial. Also, they simply vary the common characteristics of a specific species, but this does not properly explain how new species evolved and common into extents that can be said to have occurred only if this group of battles we are thinking about splits into two populations that cannot reproduce with one another. When this occurs, they can be called to dependent species. So can we extend expand the reasoning have used above by us to explain this specification. Think what would happen if the buses the beetles feed on are widely spread over a mountain range. As a result, the beetle population becomes very large, but individual beetles feed mostly on a few nearby buses throughout their life cycle. They do not move far. So in this large population of beetles, there will be subpopulations in neighborhoods since female and male beetles have to mate for reproduction to take place. Most reproduction will be present in these subpopulations. Of course, an occasional adventures beetle might travel from one side to another, or a beetle is caught by a crow from one side and dropped in the other side without being eaten. In either case, the male migrant beetle will reproduce with the female of the local population. This will result in the genes of the migrant beetle entering a new population. This kind of gene passage is bound to happen between populations that are partly but not completely differentiated. If, however, between these type of subpopulations a large river comes into existence, the two populations will be isolated further. The levels of gene flow between them will slow down even further. Over generations, genetic drift will accumulate various changes in each some population. Also, natural selection may also operate separately in these various geographic locations. Thus, in the territory of some population crops are alimented by eagles, but this does not take place for the other subpopulations where crow numbers are very high. As a result, at the first sight, the green variation will not be selected while it will be selected strongly at the second. Together, the process of natural selection and genetic drift will result in the two isolated subpopulations of beetles becoming more and more separate from each other. Eventually, members of these two groups will not be able of reproducing with each other even if they occur to meet. There can be various ways by which this can happen if the DNA changes are severe enough, like a change in the number of chromosomes. Eventually, the germ cells of the two groups cannot combine with females, like females will not mate with red males, but mate only with green males. Which permits very strong natural selection for greenness. Now, if such a green female beetle meets a red male from the other beetle group, her behavior will make sure that there is no reproduction between them. Effectively, new species of beetles are being produced. Evaluation and classification. On the basis of these principles, we can work out the evolutionary relationships of the species we observe around us. It is a sort of going back in time. We can do this by determining an increase of characteristics between species to understand this process. Let us think back to our discussion on the classification of organizations in the previous class. Similarities between organizations will allow us to group them and then study the groups for which characteristics determine more fundamental differences between organizations, and which ones decide less basic differences. What do you understand by characteristics? Anyway, characteristics are details of behavior or appearance. In other words, a particular form or a specific function. That we have four limbs. Four limbs is thus a characteristics that plants can perform photosynthesis is also a characteristics. Some basic characteristics will be shared by various organizations. The cell is the basic structure and a functional unit of life in all organizations. Thus, the characteristics in the next level of classification would be shared by most of the organizations, but not by all. A basic characteristics of a cell design that differs among various organizations is whether the cell contains a nucleus. Bacterial cells do not, while the cells of most other organizations do. Among organizations having nucleated cells, which ones are multicellular and which ones unicellular. That property marks a very basic difference in body organizations because of specialization of cell types and tissues. In multicellular organizations, whether they can perform photosynthesis or not will provide the next level of classification. Among the multicellular organizations that cannot perform photosynthesis, whether the skeleton present inside the body or around the body will mark another fundamental design change. We can see that even in some questions that we have asked, a theory is developing that allows us to form classification of groups. The more characteristics to a species will present in common, the more closely they are related, and as the more closely they are correlated, the more recently they will have had a same ancestor. An example will help. A sister and a brother are closely related. They have common ancestors in the first generation, namely their parents before them, a girl and her brother. This is because cousins come from a common ancestors. These grandparents in the second generation before them, not in the first one. Now we can appreciate that classification of species is a reflection of their evolutionary relationships. We can thus make small groups of species with recent common ancestors, then supergroups of the groups having more distant common centers, and so on. In theory, we can keep moving backwards like this until we come to the notion of a single species at the starting of involuntary time. If that is the case, then at some point in the history of the earth, non-living material must have resulted in life. There are various theories about how this might have occurred. It would be interesting to come up with our own theories. Tracing evolutionary relationships. When we try to follow evolutionary relationships, how do we identify the common characteristics? These characteristics in various organizations would be similar because they are passed into them from a common ancestors. As an example, think the fact that mammals have four limbs, as do birds, amphibians and reptiles. The basic structure of the limbs is similar to it has been modified to perform various functions in different vertebrates. Such homologous characteristics are helpful in identifying an evolutionary relationship between apparently various species. However, all similarities normally in organism are not essential because of a common ancestry. What would we think about the wings of bats and birds? For example, bats and birds have wings, but squirrels and lizards do not. So are bats and birds more closely related to each other. than to lizards or squirrels. Before we jump to this conclusion, before we jump to this conclusion, let us see the wings of bats and birds more closely. When we do that, we observe that the wings of bats are skin folds stretched between elongated fingers, but the bird's wings are a feathery covering all along the arm. The designs the designs of the two wings the designs of the two wings, their components and structures are thus very different. They look same because they have a common use for flying, but their origins are not common. This makes them analogous rather than the homologous characteristics. It would no be interesting to think about whether but arms and braid arms should be considered analogous or homologous. Fossils such studies of structure of organ can be done not only on current species but also on species that are no longer alive. How do we find that these extinct species ever existed? We study about this from finding fossils. What are fossils? Generally, when organizations die, their bodies will decompose and be lost. But every once in a while, the body parts, or at least the whole body, may be in an environment that does not decompose it completely. If a dead insect gets buried in hot mud, like it will not decompose. It will not decompose quickly, and the mud will eventually become hard and retain the impressions of the different become hard and retain the impression of the different insect impression of the different body parts of the insect. All such preserved traces of living organizations are known as fossils. How can we find that how old the fossils are? There are two components to this estimation. One is relative. If we dig deeper into the earth and start tracing out the fossils, it is reasonable to think that the fossils we find near to the surface are more recent than the fossils we find in deeper layers. The second way of dating fossils is by finding the ratios of various isotopes of the same element in the fossil mass. It would be amazing to find out actually how this method works. Evolution by stages. A question that arises here is if complicated organs, for example, like the eye, are selected for by the advantage they give, how can they be produced by a single DNA change? Surely, such complex organs will be generated bit by bit over many generations. But how can each intermediate change be chosen? For there are various intermediate change be chosen for. There are various possible explanations. Even an intermediate stage, like a rudimentary eye, can be helpful to some extent. This might be enough to provide a fitness advantage. In fact, the eye, like the wing, seems to be a very common and popular adaptation. Insects contain them. So does an octopus, and so do vertebrates, and the eye structure in each of these organizations is separate enough for them to have various evolutionary origins. Also, a change that is helpful for one property to begin with can become useful later for quite a various function. For example, feathers can start out as giving insulation in cold weather, but later they might become helpful in fight in fact become helpful in flight. In fact, some dinosaurs had feathers, although they could not fly. With the help of these feathers, birds seem to have adapted the feathers to flight later. Of course, this means that birds are very deeply related to reptiles since dinosaurs were reptiles. It is also it is all very well to think that a very display appearing structures evolve from a common skeletal design. It is true that analysis of the different organ structure in fossils allows us to estimates how far back evolutionary correlationships go, but those are close about what happened in history. Are there any current examples of this type of process? The world cabbage plant is a good example. Over more than 2000 years, humans have cultivated wild cabbage as a food plant and created various vegetables from it by selection. Of course, this is artificial selection rather than natural selection. So some farmers have wanted to choose for very short distances between leaves and have bred the cabbage we ate. Some have wanted to select for development of arrested flower and have bred broccoli or for sterling flowers and have generated the cauliflower. Somehow looked for swollen parts and come up with chloravi. Some have simply selected for slightly larger leaves and come up with a leaf vegetable known as kale. Would we have considered that all these structures are evolved from the same ancestors if we had not done it ourselves? Another way of finding out the evolutionary relationships depends on the original idea that we started with. That idea was that variation in DNA taking place during reproduction are the basic events in evolution. If that is the case, then the comparison or the DNA of different species should provide a direct estimate of how much the DNA has changed during the evaluation of these species. This method is now used extensively to different evolutionary relationships. Evolution should not be equated with progress. In such a practice of tracing the family trees of species, we required to remember certain things. Firstly, there are multiple branches possible at every and each stage of this process. So it is not as if one species is eliminated to produce a new one. A new species has developed, but that does not necessarily now mean, for example, like the beetle we have been thinking about, that not all the species will lost if we it will all dependent upon the environment. Also, it is not as if the newly created species are in any way better than the older one. It is just that genetic drift and natural selection have together led to the generation of a population that cannot reproduce with the original one. So for example, it is not true that human beings have evolved from chimpanzees rather both human beings and chimpanzees have evolved from a common ancestors a long time ago. That common ancestors is likely to have been neither human or nor chimpanzee. Also, the first step of separation from that ancestor is unlikely to have resulted in human beings and modern chimpanzees. Instead, the two resultant species have probably evolved in their own separate waves to produce the current forms or varieties. In fact, there is no actually progress in the idea of evolution. Evolution is normally the generation and shaping of diversity by environmental selection. The only progressive trend in evolution seems to be that more and more complex body organizations have emerged over time. However, it is not again as if the older designs are influenced. So many of the simpler and older designs still survive. In fact, one of the simplest life forms, bacteria, inhabit the most inhospitable habitats like hot springs, ice in Antarctica, and the deep sea thermal vents. In other words, humans are not the pinnacle of evolution, but simply simplify yet another species in the teeming spectrum of evolving life. Human evolution, the same tools for finding evolutionary relationships as excavating, studying and time dating fossils as well as determining DNA sequence have been helpful studying human being evolution. There is a great diversity of human features and forms across the planet so much so that for a long time people used to discuss about human races skin color used to discuss about human races skin color used to be the commonest way of identifying this is so known as races. Some were colored brown, some like white or yellow. A major question debated for a long time was have these apparent groups evolved separately over recent years. This evidence has become very clear. The answer for this evidence is that there is no biological basis or to the notation of human races. All human beings are a single species. Not only that, regardless of where we have lived for the past few hundred thousand years, we all come from Africa. The earliest members of the human species, Homo sapiens, can be found there. Our genetic footprints can be found back to our African roots, a couple of few hundred thousand years ago. Some of our ancestors left Africa while others stayed on. While while our while the residents spread in Africa, the migrants slowly spread across the planet, from Africa to West Asia, then to Central Asia, Eurasia, East Asia, South Asia. They traveled down the islands of Philippines and the Indonesia to Australia, and then they traveled across the Bering Land Bridge to the Americas. They did not go in a single line, so they were not flying for the sake of traveling. Obviously, they went backwards and forwards with groups, sometimes separating from one another, sometimes coming back to mix with one another, even moving in and out of Africa. Like all other species on the planet, they had come into being accidentally by evolution and were trying to live their lives the best they could.